Hey guys, it's Kyla at the MJC, and today we're going to go through the placement section of the modification motion. Before I get started though, as ever, just a reminder that nothing in this video is intended to be legal advice. It's a video, so I'm not able to analyze your specific situation to help you determine whether a modification motion is right for you, whether this form and what you're asking for on it is something that a court is likely to approve, whether what you're asking for is in your best interest, and those sorts of things. If you have questions about that or other things like evidentiary standards, you should probably get some brief legal advice. Here in Milwaukee, you can get that through the Marquette Volunteer Legal Clinics. If you're located in another county, you can contact your clerk of court to find out what resources are available in your area. All right, so we're going to jump into this physical placement section. Just as a brief reminder, in Wisconsin, placement deals with where the children spend time, so who they live with, when they visit with a parent they don't live with, and things like that. A lot of people get this mixed up with custody, which is decision-making power. We'll talk about that in a later video. But just keep in mind, this section you're going to be filling out if you want to change which parent your child lives with, change the schedule of when each parent sees the child, or want to deal with, say, exchanges. So when you trade off the child, who picks them up, who drops them off, that kind of stuff. All right, so let's jump into the section. You'll check box A if you're wanting to talk about physical placement. If you aren't wanting to talk about placement on your motion, you don't need to fill out this section, and you'll skip to the next section and the next video. But if you're doing placement, box A. And then here you're going to put the child's name. So we've been doing Sally Smith. Or if you have more than one child, both children's names. Or all three, all four, however many children you're wanting to talk about. Do note that if you have multiple children, let's say John and Jane have Sally and Susie, but you only want to talk about one of those children, so let's say John only wanted to talk about changing who Susie lived with, so they were agreeing maybe that Sally would continue to live with Jane, but now Susie was going to live with John, then you take out that. So basically the only children listed here are the ones that you want this order that you're proposing to apply to. So a lot of times that will probably be all of the children you have, but it doesn't have to be all of them. All right, perfect. And then for most people, you're going to fall into one of these first four boxes. So I'm just going to go over each one briefly, and then I'll kind of show you how to fill each one out. So you'll notice that all of these say from one sort of schedule to a new one. So from, it's talking about what your current placement schedule is in your court order. So some people may not be following the ordered placement, but we still, when we're talking about going from what to what, we want to talk about what's in your ordered placement schedule. So if you either know that or have a copy of your placement schedule, awesome, you can use that. If you're not sure what your ordered placement schedule is, you can get a copy of your court order from the Civil Records Division of your local courthouse. And then you'll know what the order is, so you know what you have, so you can decide which of these boxes applies to your situation. The first one is if you're wanting to go with primary placement with one parent to primary placement with the other. So in this situation, let's say if the child currently lived with Jane most of the time, and now John wants the child to live mostly with him, that would be this section. So we would say, check the box for number one, put here the name of the parent who currently has the ordered placement. Again, even if the child is now living with John, if the order says primary placement with Jane, we're going to say from primary placement with Jane to primary placement with, and this is where we put the name of the parent who we now, in our new order that we're asking for, who we want to have placement. So just like that. And yeah, so this is saying going from the children living with one parent to living with the other. Section 2, number 2 here, is if you're going from shared placement. Shared placement has a very specific definition in the Wisconsin statutes. It's 92 overnights in a year, basically 25% of the time with the parent who has less time. So the person who has less time with the kids has 25% of the time, which is usually about 92 overnights a year. So if your order says you have shared placement, and now you're wanting to have primary, so the kids live mostly with one parent, or again, one parent, the parent with less time will now have less than 92 overnights in a year. That's going to be number 2. And then here you'll put the name of the parent who you want to now have the children live with. So again, John Smith. Number 3 is where you'll go if right now the kids currently are ordered to have primary placement with one parent or the other, so they live mostly with one parent. And now we want a shared placement schedule where the person with less time has at least 92 overnights in a year, which usually ends up being weekly, about 2 or more overnights per week, or it could all be globbed together. So it could also be if you have, 92 days in the summer or something like that. So that would be 3 if we're going from living with one parent to a shared placement. Number 4 is sort of the catch-all if you just want to change your schedule. So in our hypothetical, if the children currently live with Jane and John, let's say, has every other weekend, and he doesn't want to have the children live mostly with him, he just wants it to go from, say, every other weekend or every weekend to Tuesdays and Thursdays or every other Tuesday. He just wants to change what the days or times or that sort of thing are. That's going to be number 4. So in our scenario, I think as we've sort of been going through these, we know that the kids are currently with Jane, and John wants them to be with him. So we'll do that there. If you check any of the boxes 1 through 4, the next section that you'll do is this sort of 2 lines here. And it wants to know, what is the placement schedule going to be? So in a situation where you've suggested going from placement with one parent to placement with the other, it wants to know, when are they going to see the other parent? So in our example here, we're saying we want them to live primarily with John. This question wants to know, when, if ever, will the children be with Jane? So we could say placement with Jane. And we could put a specific schedule. So we could say every other weekend, Friday 5 p.m. to Sunday 5 p.m. If you don't want to put, and this can be anything you want. So it wouldn't have to be every other weekend. It could be, every Tuesday or every other Tuesday, whatever works sort of for your schedules, 2 weeks in the summer, whatever it is you want to propose. If you don't want something specific, so if you want it to just be the placement with the other person will be when we agree. I agree they get to see the kids, but we'll come together, we'll talk, we'll figure out when those placements are going to be. You could say at reasonable times upon reasonable notice. Basically, that's fancy lawyer language for we agree that the other parent will see the kid, or I agree that the other parent will be allowed to see the child, but we're gonna figure out when those times will be. Those will be when we agree for placement to be. If you're wanting to propose that the other person not be able to see the child at all, you could say that you want it to be held open. Held open is fancy lawyer language for 0 right now. If you're looking at asking for it to be held open, you might want to get some legal advice, because sometimes there can be more layers to that. But obviously not something you're required to do. And you'll still fill this out even if you're doing shared placement. So if say I checked number 3, or down here, if we're changing a shared placement schedule, you can put that too. So we could say placement with Jane during the school year, and placement with John from June 1 to September 1. Or whatever that will be. So it's just kind of the schedule you want to ask for here. I am just going to tweak this, and we'll go back to every other weekend. Friday 5 p.m. to Sunday. And notice how I'm putting the times. You want to be as specific in this section as you can be. The more specific, the better. A lot of people just want to say, well, whatever the court wants to give me. And ultimately, you're the one filling this out, but we definitely recommend putting your dream schedule, putting what you'd like to ask for, and being as specific as you can. Because otherwise, my ex and I might disagree about when a weekend starts. I might say it's Friday at 5. My ex might say it's Saturday at noon. And having sort of a specific thing just helps define the rules of the game and really make it clear what's being asked for. This next box, number 5, is used when the schedule we've suggested here gives one parent, the person with less time, less than 25% placement. So again, less than that 92 overnights in a year. And so if that is not the situation, so if here we propose that Jane has week 1, John has week 2, or, something like that, then you don't need to do number 5. You can just skip on to the next one. But if you are proposing something where the person with less time has less than 25% of the time, which we are, because here John is suggesting that Jane only have every other weekend, 2 overnights, 2 times 26 is going to be less than 92. So in that situation, you'll check the box beside number 5, and here you're going to put why the schedule you've proposed here is in the children's best interest. So it can even just be as simple as this is in the children's best interest because, and you'll just write in whatever your reason is, whatever you think this is best for the children. Now be careful, some people will say this is best because it works better for me. Again, we want to focus on why this is best for the children or the child in your case. But it could be because Jane's work schedule won't allow more placement. Or, it could be because, because now Jane lives in Chicago. I know that contradicts up above where I think her address is in Milwaukee, but you get the point. Now Jane lives in Chicago and this will be more stable, sort of just whatever is going on, because it works best with Jane's busy work schedule and will provide the children with consistency. And so if you have questions about what to write here, that could be another good thing to get some advice about. Number 6 is if you're wanting to ask for placement to be supervised, or if placement is already supervised, if you're wanting it to be unsupervised. If the placement in your current order is already unsupervised and you want it to remain unsupervised, skip number 6, you don't need to do it. But if you're wanting to change, so if, say, John were wanting Jane's placement to be supervised, you write the name of the person whose placement you want to be supervised on that line, and you check supervised. Or if somebody already has supervised placement and we want it to now be unsupervised, you can check unsupervised. So again, name of the person whose placement is currently supervised, and then check here that we want it now to be unsupervised. If again, your current order doesn't have any supervised placement, you don't want to ask for any, you can just skip number 6. Number 7 is an other section. It's where you can include anything that involves placement that hasn't fit into any of these sort of schedule spots above, these spaces above. The most common ones we see might be exchanges. So somebody might say exchanges to take place at McDonald's. McDonald's will be more specific on 8th Street. Ooh. Or it could be sometimes if there's a restraining order between the parties, they want to indicate how, a third party, maternal grandmother will take the child to and from placement. Just kind of whatever you want to propose that didn't fit into those other categories. For a lot of folks, you won't have anything for number 7, and that's totally fine. You'll just leave it blank. But it's just kind of a catch-all if the thing you're asking for didn't fit into any of those categories above. Last but not least, we have this little tag on the bottom that just wants to know if you've ever done court-ordered mediation in your case. If you have, and again, mediation is where they would have sent you to work with an attorney who would have tried to help you come to an agreement. It's not the same as the guardian ad litem, who's appointed to represent the best interests of the children. This would be an attorney who is trying to help you and the other person come to an agreement between you. So you would have been sort of working together with the help of this attorney, so not a guardian ad litem. If you have, you'll put that you have, and then you'll put the date that you attempted that. We'll say 2000. If you have not done mediation, then you're just going to check the box here saying we've never attempted mediation on the placement issue. All right, well, that's all for the placement section. Thank you guys as ever for joining me. We'll see you next time for custody, but until then, go out and represent yourselves well.